are talking Infernum. This one is directed and written by Dutch Marich and stars Suziey Block. And it's a low budget, a psychological, slow burn kind of film movie. Now the story, we have a prologue at the beginning, and we have this kind of family that are out camping in the woods. And we hear this strange sound. It sounds almost mechanical, and the parents go out to investigate and disappear, leaving this young girl. Cut to some years later, and this young girl is now a young woman, and she is doing an art exhibit, really trying to kind of shine a light on this phenomena that is this kind of strange sound that is kind of rumoured and kind of, as legend has it, to be the kind of the sounds of the gates to hell that precedes kind of supernatural events and things like this. And the movie starts off with a few kind of interviews with kind of witnesses and stuff like that. And the bulk of the story focuses on this young woman and her kind of boyfriend, and she's kind of very wrapped up in this kind of investigation for her work, and her boyfriend's kind of getting a little annoyed with her, and she ends up trying to go to this reported phenomena in another location in Nevada somewhere, and she ends up on this kind of train when there's a landslide that kind of blocks the road, and it's this kind of old antique train, and she ends up there with herself, her boyfriend, this kind of like this assistant guy that's helping her, and there is another woman on the train as well as kind of you know, the kind of the conductor, etc. But the train ends up getting stuck in a tunnel, and there seems to be some type of phenomena happening both outside and inside the train, and this kind of strange sound starts to come on, and well, that's all we're going to say about the plot. So let's talk about what works first of all with Infernum. So obviously this production has a very small budget. But I've got to say, this production has done the best that they can, I feel, with the resources that they have. Because if you have a good idea and you can create a good atmosphere with likable and believable characters, do you know what? You're kind of almost there in the kind of the race, if that makes sense. And that's what this movie does do. It's a very slow burn film, so it's not going to be for everyone. But when we do get to our kind of, when these guys are kind of trapped within this kind of like this tunnel on this train, because it's actually filmed on a legitimate, you know, train in a tunnel in the dark, it looks creepy. This is a kind of like a in an old train, kind of up, you know, 100 or so years old or whatever. So it looks really creepy, and the movie does a great job using things like audio effects, lighting, to create a very kind of like tense atmosphere that slowly kind of builds as the movie kind of progresses. I also thought it's complemented by pretty decent performances from our main cast. I actually quite enjoyed the relationship between our female lead and her boyfriend, because they're not getting on, but neither one of them is painted to be necessarily a bad person. She's just wrapped up in her work, and he's kind of getting a little bit annoyed with it, but neither of them are particularly, they're not kind of like ones like the typical kind of like the bad person. They just have some problems, like, you know, many people do, but they still each have a kind of a point, if that makes sense. I have to be honest, I maybe even sympathise with the boyfriend a little bit more than our kind of female protagonist, because he does seem to kind of get the shaft somewhat, but he's not portrayed to be like a complete kind of like doofus, if that makes sense. And our kind of assistant as well is this younger lad who's kind of following, and again, well, kind of like, even though he doesn't get lots of screen time, I quite enjoyed his kind of character, and he seemed like a kind of a genuine kind of person. So the trio of our main cast here, I thought are for the most part portrayed, apart from one thing which I'll come on to. The movie doesn't really have much in the way of special effects. There are a couple of kind of makeup effects which I think are done pretty well, and there are a couple of jump scares, but I feel that they were earned. I got to say, I don't think they were too. But there's not loads of them. the main thing here, this movie is very much a kind of a psychological mood piece. Because you have this kind of like, this creeping dread. We don't know, the movie doesn't give us loads of information about this kind of phenomena, this kind of like this weird sound, but it gives us enough to kind of, so we understand, you know, as much at least as our kind of central protagonist does. So there are still things that are, you know, we don't know, but it's enough to understand the motivations of this kind of our central protagonist here. So maybe what doesn't work. So I've got to say, this movie does take a little bit of time to get going. It's a slow burn all the way through, but I feel it maybe takes a little bit of time really to kind of really start off with the plot. And before we get into the kind of the train journey ultimately. So it's a slow burn, but maybe just a tad too slow for its own good. In regards to, I mentioned the acting, I enjoyed the acting apart from one scene really, and this is where they discover a dead body on the train, and it's kind of one of these like typical film reactions where it's more or less kind of like a fairly kind of reserved reaction to finding a dead body. And considering I feel how the strong the acting has been until that point, it just, you know, these people would, if you can put yourself in their shoes, if that makes sense, and kind of, you would be a little bit more freaked out than maybe these guys kind of were. So that kind of bothered me just a tad. And I feel the movie maybe doesn't have quite enough plot necessarily. This movie does, like I said, it's a slow burn film, and it's very good at kind of creating a very tense and kind of foreboding atmosphere. But maybe it needs a little bit more kind of going on in regards to plot development, because it does seem to kind of stall just a kind of a little bit. It's still an enjoyable movie, and it's like I said, it's very, very atmospheric, and it creates a really kind of tense and dark atmosphere that is very kind of, you know, scary, just for a kind of a strange kind of weird kind of mood that the film permeates. But I was kind of wanting a little bit more to happen, to be honest, a little bit more plot development, a little bit of a stronger narrative, and I feel the conclusion is, it tries to have one of these kind of typical kind of like pull the rug out of your moment, very kind of final shot of the movie, and I don't think it's a little unclear about what has happened there, I feel. So it's worth a watch. I enjoyed it, but if you're not into slow burns, then you are not going to be interested in this movie, because it really is a very slow-paced movie with very little actually happening, but does a great job of having an unnerving and foreboding atmosphere throughout. So I do feel, for the very small budget that this movie clearly had, they have done the best possible job. Well, at least a very good job of what this movie could have been like, I would say. Maybe it needed a little bit more kind of plot in there, but nonetheless, it's still well worth a watch, in my opinion, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.